Kafka Connect is the integration API for Apache Kafka, and to use it as a framework, you install a particular connector plugin for the particular technology that you want to integrate with. So you want to get data in from a database, you install a JDBC connector plugin maybe, or you want to get data down to Elasticsearch, you install the Elasticsearch connector plugin. So to install these plugins, we need to go and get the appropriate jar file. The documentation shows you how to go and install them, but I'm going to show you how to today as well. So we're going to head over to Confluent Hub, which is where you can actually get all of these from. So if we go over to here, you can see Confluent Hub, and you can search for a particular connector. So let's say we're interested in we want to get data in from a flat file. So we're going to use the spool dir connector. So here's our particular connector. You can use Confluent Hub. You can go trawling through GitHub as well if you want and go and build these connectors directly wherever you can particularly find them. Confluent Hub is a good place to go and get them from because they're already pre-packaged for you. Now, if you're using Confluent Hub and you've got the Confluent distribution, you can just simply copy this installation command here to go and install the connector. If you're using Apache Kafka that you've downloaded from a different distribution, then you can go and install the jar file directly, and we're going to see how to do that. We're also going to show how you can install it if you're using Docker. So let's go and see what this looks like installing a connector into a local Confluent platform installation. So this is just on a laptop, kind of like proof of concept or development environment. So we're going to say Confluent local version, just see which version we're working with. We've got Confluent 5.5 here. We're going to use the Confluent Hub command. So here's our command, it was on our clipboard. We copied it from Confluent Hub itself from the particular page of the connector we're interested in. So we're saying Confluent Hub install, this is the connector that we want in the particular version. And we hit enter, and it says, well, where do you want to install it? So we're going to install it into this first location here, and we want to install it, yes we do. And now that's going to pull down the particular jar file. It's going to say, do you agree to the license? Yes, we agree to the license. Are we absolutely sure? And all of these you can actually put -- no prompt when you do the original command, and it'll just run through all of these and do it automatically. So you can script the installation if you want to. So this pulls down the jar file, it puts it into a local folder, and then it goes and updates the Kafka Connect worker configuration. So we're going to dig into that into a moment and have a little look, but there's a configuration called plugin.path, where we need to specify where Kafka Connect worker is to go and look for its different connector jars. When you're using Kafka Connect in distributed mode across multiple nodes, you need to make sure you've installed all of the connectors across all workers, because where a task executes could be on any of those particular workers that are available within your Kafka Connect cluster. If you're using Kafka Connect in distributed mode on a single node or using it standalone, then obviously you just have to install it in that one particular place. So now it's pulled down the jar file, it's installed it. Do we want to update all the particular configurations? So we say, yes, we do, please. So now it's gone and installed it for us. And if we start up the worker, so let's go and do this. So Confluent local start connect. So this is going to bring up the particular dependencies that we need for Kafka Connect. So we've got Zookeeper, we've got the Kafka broker itself, and we're going to start up Kafka Connect. And once that's running, we can run a little call against the REST API of Kafka Connect, and we can actually make sure that the particular plugin is available to us. Whilst that's running, let's just go and have a little look in a separate window here. See, I'm quite impatient when these things are going on, so I like to use something like tmux that you can do things in parallel. Okay, so Kafka Connect is up, and now what we're going to do is we're going to run a little REST API call against Kafka Connect itself and say, show me which plugins you've got. So here we can see these are all the available plugins, and a bunch of these ship with Kafka Connect when you download Confluent Platform. In future versions of Confluent Platform, the connectors will be distributed separately just to make sure you have a smaller download installation. But for now, we've got all these different ones. So here are the ones that we actually asked for when we installed from Confluent Hub. These are all the spool dir ones. And then you've got a bunch of other connectors that are installed by default with Confluent Platform. So that's one way to go and install it, is to use Confluent Hub client. It goes and pulls down the jar file, it works out where are my Kafka Connect configuration files, updates those, and off you go. Now let's have a look at another way. We're going to pretend that this is a brand new installation, or this is like another node of our worker, and we're going to install it manually ourselves. So this manual installation process is probably how you go about doing it on a production server, or where you're actually scaling Kafka Connect workers out and you can't use Confluent Local. Because Confluent Local, that command that I showed you, that's for a single node, and we're talking about multiple nodes here. So we're going to go and do it manually. So we've cleared that out, and somewhere else within this we've probably got the other, if we go into Java maybe, CD Java, we've got all the other connectors. So these are the ones that ship with it. So you'll see all these different ones here. So for argument's sake, we're just going to download a jar file into this folder directly. So let's head over to Confluent Hub. So this is where we want to get our connector from. We're not going to use the Confluent Hub client in this case. We're just going to pull the jar file down directly. So we say no thank you to that, and it's pulling down the jar file here, and that's going to pull it down into my downloads folder. So whilst it's doing that, we'll head over here and we'll have a little look at the configuration files that Kafka Connect uses. So let's split the screen again and change into that. And under etc, we've got Kafka, and we've got one here called Connect Standalone and Connect Distributed Properties. So when you start up Kafka Connect, whether standalone or distributed, you give it a configuration file which tells the worker how to run. So here's our Connect Distributed one, so we're going to use that. So if we inspect that file, we can see various bits of configuration. And if we search for plugin path, this is the important one which tells Kafka Connect worker where to go and look for the jar files for different connectors. We can see we've got this one here, and because I ran the Confluent Hub client and it said, do you want me to update your things, it's gone and updated them. But for now, let's just say we don't actually want to do that, so we're going to get rid of that. And it's actually just going to revert back to this user shared Java. Let's pretend actually we're going to put our connector somewhere else, just to be really difficult. So we're going to put it in, the folder that we want to put it in is user arm off Confluent platform, and we'll call it connectors. Okay, so we've set that, and let's go and create that folder up here. So make dir connectors and change into that folder. So at the moment there's nothing in that folder. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy from my downloads folder the spool dir connector into my local connectors folder. So there's my zip file, and then I'm going to unzip that. It says there we go, and get rid of the zip file. Okay, so now in my connectors folder we've got the actual plugin itself, and we can go and check within that. I can see in there we've got a lib, and within that lib we'll have a bunch of jar files, including the actual connector itself. So Kafka Connect spool dir, there's my jar file and all of its dependencies. So let's go down to the worker, and if we save that particular file, okay, so we've saved that. Now let's start up Confluent local start Kafka. So we're just going to bring up the broker and the zookeeper, and then we're going to spin up Kafka Connect directly using that configuration file. So Kafka is starting there, zookeeper is starting, so they're both up. So now I can say connect distributed, and we're going to give it the path to the configuration file that we updated. So connect Kafka Connect distributed. Come on, where is it at? Kafka, and then connect distributed. And that's going to start up the worker. So here I'm starting it from the command line directly. If you're using it on a production server, you'll probably have a service file or something like that. But you're invoking the connect worker, you're passing it the configuration file, and we can see that starting up. And it looks like it's started. And if we now go up to this separate window here, we can go and see if the plugins exist. So let's run that, and it says here are your plugins. So this time we've just got those ones there, and it doesn't have that other folder, because if we go and inspect that the connector configuration, we're going to grep that for plugin. So in our configuration file that we've launched the worker with, the plugin path is set to /user share Java and then /users arm off Confluent platform connectors. So Kafka Connect itself ships with particular connectors built in. Those are parts of Apache Kafka Connect. And then when you use Confluent Platform and you have Kafka Connect, it ships at the moment with a bunch of other connectors like Elasticsearch and JBC and so on built in. And those are the ones that we saw in that other connectors folder, that user share Java underneath the Confluent Platform installation. Whereas the file we're using here is saying from this absolute path here, so /user share Java, which on my Mac, if I try and list that out, it says, well, you've got a bunch of stubs and stuff like that to do with the Mac operating system. The actual connectors, if we wanted to use those, are relative to Confluent Platform. They're in share and Java, and they're in there. So if we wanted to actually use those, we would need to use that full path. So that would be /users off Confluent Platform, and then share and Java. That would be the actual path that we would need to add on to plugin path. So let's look at that. So grep plugin. Here's our plugin path. At the moment it's set to this path here, which doesn't actually have any connectors under it. This path here, if we're going to have a look at that, has got the particular connector that we installed. Here's our spool.dir one. If we wanted to add in those other connectors which exist on the file system, we would need to add in this particular path here. So let's go and do that, in fact. So let's vi this particular file. So there's our file. Let's go and look for plugin. Here's plugin path, and we can add to that this folder here. So now we've got the other one, we may as well get rid of that because it doesn't have any connectors in that we actually want. And so then here's the one that's saying, well, in this folder here, you've got some connectors, the spool.dir one that we put in that folder. Here's this one here, which has got some of the other connectors that ship with it. So this way you can manage where you want to locate your connector jar files. You could put them all in the same location. You could put them in a separate folder that you maybe mount onto different devices. It's entirely up to you. And if we change that, and let's go and restart the worker just to prove that this actually works. So what I did there was I went to the bottom pane on the window here. My connect worker was actually running in that process. So I cancelled that, Control-C to stop the worker. And now I'm just going to run it again. So connect distributed, passing it that same configuration file. Now that's spinning up, and you'll actually notice on the standard output here, it's going to start showing that it's loading those other connectors. So like there's the Elasticsearch one. There was probably the JDBC one that went by as well. It will take a little bit longer to start up because it's scanning those other folders, it's loading those other jar files. And once that's running, we can run that same command that we did before. So this is simply a curl command using the REST API of Kafka Connect. So there's my Kafka Connect worker, localhost 8083, go to /connector plugins, and then we're just using JQ to parse that output. Because if we don't parse the output, it looks like that, which isn't so readable. So instead, we're going to say, let's use JQ and pass the output, and now we just get a nice clean list of all the connectors that we've actually got installed on that particular worker. So here's our file stream ones. Here's the ones which are actually built into Apache Kafka itself when it ships. Here are the ones that are part of Confluent Platform, that are part of the distribution that we downloaded. And then if we page up, here are the ones from that other folder where we installed spool.dir. So we could put spool.dir connector into the same folder as these other ones here. It's entirely up to us as operators where we want to put these files. Now let's have a little look. Let's shut this down here at how we can do all of this within Docker. Because Docker's a really useful way of creating environments and spinning them up and tearing them down to go and do repeatable tests or demos, which is why I tend to use it a lot. So let's do Confluent local destroy. So that's just going to shut down that environment there, because I'm about to bring up a Kafka Connect environment using Docker, so I don't want my ports to clash and so on. So shut down that worker at the bottom of the screen here, and we've also shut down my Kafka and my Zookeeper that we're running there. So I'm going to just close those windows there, and we're going to head over to a new folder. So this is in demo scene. So the demo scene repository, if you're not familiar with it, is where you get a whole bunch of different demos and stuff like that. So we can have a little look at that. We can see here's demo scene. And over here you've got all these sorts of different demos to do with kind of integrating Kafka in this way and building microservices and all sorts of stuff that back up the demos and talks you may have seen online. So there's a lot of stuff, fun stuff to go and play around with. Not all of it is like of the latest version. It's like as it was when we created that demo, we checked it in and used it from there. If you want a kind of like a curated set of examples that are up to date and all the rest of it and fully tested, head over to the Confluent Inc. examples repository. So here you've got another bunch of really good examples, and these are much more tightly QA'd and like the latest version and all that kind of good stuff. So with that said, we're in the demo scene repository, and in here we've got a Docker Compose file. So I'm using Docker and I'm using Docker Compose to orchestrate those containers. And if we load up that Docker Compose, look at the YAML there, and page down to our Connect worker. Here's Kafka Connect. Now I'm using the Kafka Connect base image. So there are two Connect Docker images from Confluent. There's CP Kafka Connect, CP Kafka Connect base. And the base one is what the Kafka Connect is built on. The base one doesn't have any of the plugins. The CP Kafka Connect does. CP Kafka Connect base is just the Kafka Connect runtime. So the other one is useful if you want all of those plugins just there for you. Base is useful if you want the smaller image and you want to add in your own ones. And there are two ways to do this, to add them in. Here's how we're going to spin up the particular worker. Here's our configuration. And now here is one way of doing it. So we're going to say we're going to override the command when the container starts up. And by default, when you start a Docker image, or Docker container based on an image, it will use the particular entry point or command that the person who built that image said to do. So you like, go and run this, and it'll just do the thing automatically to start up. Within Docker Compose, you can override that, and that's what we're doing here. So we're saying, bring the container up, but don't run what you've been told to. Go and run some other stuff. So we're going to run bash, and we're going to run a bunch of commands within bash. We're going to go and install some connectors first, and then we're going to manually invoke the actual command that the container needs to execute to bring up the worker. So this is one way of doing it. You simply override the command. We say, let's go and install the spool.dir connector as before. Here's that no prompt that I said. So you run it with no prompt and it just goes ahead and does it. Here's the other connector that we're going to install, the JDBC connector, because we're using the base image. If we're using just CP Kafka Connect, at the moment that has the JDBC plugin already, we're using CP Kafka Connect base, which just has the runtime, so we're going to install all the connectors that we need. The other really important thing that we need to do is to set the plugin path correctly. So the plugin path, we've got user share Java, we've also got user share Confluent Hub components, because that's where Confluent Hub client is going to install those things by default. If you don't set the plugin path, then the Confluent Hub client will happily install those things, but Kafka Connect Worker won't go and look in that folder where it installed them for those jar files, and it won't pick them up when it starts. One thing that I've probably not specified yet is that when you install a jar file, you must restart the Kafka Connect Worker for it to pick it up. You can't just like go and install the jar file and expect it to work. You've got to restart the Kafka Connect Worker when you do it. And that gets very important when you're using Docker, because with a Docker container, if you set the worker running and then you can like shell into it and go and install these things manually, and then you think, well, why is it not working? You think, oh, well, I've not restarted the worker. So then you restart the container, which then probably wipes out any changes you've made to it. So this is why you have to go about it this way. Option one is you at runtime, you say, go and install the things and then invoke the worker. And then we fork it to the background and we do a sleep here. Otherwise you find that the whole container just shuts down once it's finished. The other way of doing it is actually creating your own Docker file. So create a Docker file, we say, base it on this one, install these other things here. So let's have a look at that now. So you might prefer to do this if you want to have a set of images that you know are kind of built and tested and approved for your particular environment and deployment, rather than just doing this kind of thing at runtime. So to do this, we're going to create ourselves a new Docker file. So I'll create a new folder here to put it in. And under this Docker file, all we do is we base it on the base, so Kafka Connect base, because we don't necessarily want to pick up all of the other connectors. So you base it on that. We're going to make sure we set the environment path correctly to pick up the folder into which the Confluent Hub client is going to install these, and then we run the installations as we need. So here we're just installing the spool.dir one, and we come out of that and we say docker build, and we're going to tag it with this particular tag here, Kafka Connect spool.dir, and dot means build it using the Docker file in the local folder. So it goes off and it does that. It bases it on this particular image, it sets that thing there, and then it goes off and runs this, pulls down the jar file from Confluent Hub, goes through and it does it because we've got the no prompt in place. So it just goes off and does that, updates the configuration, and then we've built ourselves an image. So we can now go and use this image as in the Docker itself. So if we go back to our previous folder, and here's our Docker Compose, and now where we've got Connect, we could say, actually, let's just use our own image. So I'll comment that line out, and we'll say here, let's just use Kafka Connect spool.dir, and that's going to use our local one. And under here, we say, well, actually, we don't need to override this command anymore. So let's just delete those out. Oops. Because it's just going to use that particular image, which will come straight up. In theory, you don't even need that environment set anymore either. So let's do that, and then we can say Docker Compose up Kafka Connect, and we'll bring that up. So that's going to bring up the Zookeeper, it's going to bring up the Kafka Broker, and then it's going to bring up Kafka Connect itself. So as Kafka Connect loads, you can always see it goes through, it picks up all the different plugins. You may have noticed there it said loading the plugin for spool.dir, so it certainly looks like it's worked. So that's running there. So let's just put that into the background. So Control Z if you're in Bash, or ZSH, it pauses the process and you can type BG to force it to the background. So now that task is still running, but as a background one. And if you're at jobs, it says, well, these are the ones that are running, and you can do FG, and that'll bring it to the front again, so you get to see the standard output. So we do the same thing, Control Z and BG, puts it into the background. And now I can say, tell me about my plugins that I've got loaded on my worker, and it says, here are your particular plugins, which is exactly what we wanted. So That's how you go and install a particular connector plugin into your Kafka Connect worker. If you're using one worker, you just need to install the connector plugin into that particular worker. If you've got a cluster of them, you must make sure you install the plugin and the same version of that plugin across all workers, because you never know which one is going to run the particular task for that connector or tasks for that connector. If you're using Confluent Platform locally, you can just use Confluent Local to bring up your Kafka and your Kafka Connect. You can use Confluent Hub install to install the connector. If you're using a set of different Kafka Connect Kafka Connect workers, then you're going to install the connector manually. You pull down the jar file, you put it into a folder, you update your Kafka Connect configuration, the worker configuration, say plugin.path, and you add in the folder that contains the jar files for that connector. If you're using Docker, you can use at runtime and you override the command statement and you say do a Confluent Hub install first and then you invoke the worker process, or you can just go and build your own image using a Docker file like we saw there. So if you want to know more about Kafka Connect, go and check out the talks that I've done on Kafka Connect. Go and check out the playlist of all the other Kafka Connect videos that I've done on my YouTube channel. Subscribe to the channel and go and check out Confluent Platform as well.